All right, just started the recording. Hey, everybody, welcome to today's webinar with Peg. Today, Peg's covering 4 season interests. So I'm just going to go over a few notes while we wait for everybody to log in. We have a big crowd today. So just want to let you all know, as always, when Peg takes questions, we'll be able to follow up with you all after class if you have a question and it doesn't get answered. I am distributing right now Peg's outline for her slides. If you cannot view PDFs, I know we have a couple of people who've attended in the past who can't access these PDFs. Send me an email by hitting reply to your confirmation or login details, and I'll send you a different version of the document as an email attachment. So that's that. If you guys have questions during the class, please type them into the Q&A box. I'll be checking those, and then Peg will be taking questions periodically throughout the class. And we are recording today, so we'll be able to distribute that recording following the class. So Peg really needs no introduction. I know a lot of you have attended classes with her before. She's been teaching classes with us for many years, draws on experience from her own garden that she's been working on for years. That's absolutely beautiful. And she was previously the host of our Gardening Advisor television program. So Peg, I'm gonna go ahead and let you get started.
Thank you, Sally, and good afternoon and welcome to our show. The topic for the day to me is a very, very important topic. 4 seasons of pleasure. And the wintertime is a very, very good time to look out on your landscape and to look at the structure, to look at the bones of that landscape and to think, what do I need to add to or do differently? And what do I want to accomplish? Because all of us in the wintertime are very anxious to get outside and get our hands dirty. And I have a lot of pictures today. I'm not concentrating on designing a space as much as I am encouraging you to think about some of the aspects of what you are doing outside. How do you want your space to function? How do you want it to look? And what size is your space? What can you accommodate? I'm always concentrating on diversity because that's good for the environment, but it's good for the birds, bees, and butterflies, which we know we have to sustain those, and diversity is a great way to do it. And in the process of that diversity, you can fairly easily get something that's interesting in all 4 seasons, even in a very small space, even if you only have containers, because you can grow shrubs, you can grow small trees. I have lovely small Japanese maple that I'm growing in containers, and you get a wonderful 4 seasons thing out of those because you've got the structure of that tree, and then you've got the new growth, and then you've got the fall color, and so they're just wonderful. So let's take a walk through my garden. And Clara is going with us on this walk. Clara is my little 3-year-old great-granddaughter. And when her little feet hits the driveway, she is ready to hit the garden. She loves the garden. And the funny thing is she mimics me. She puts her little hands behind her back as we walk through the garden. And so when I say, okay, Clara, let's go for a walk, that is the first thing she does. And it's such a joy. And by doing this, I want to tell you that my garden is designed primarily for function, beauty, absolutely, but it needs to be functional. And it is a family garden. Now, it is larger than a lot of people have, but you take what you like and you adapt it to the size, the space, the function that you have. I'll talk just about a few of the things that I have in the garden that are my favorites. and someone asks, what is your favorite? And my answer is always the same, the one I'm standing in front of, okay? And this actually is a section of a privacy fence, so to speak. It's a mixture of small flowering trees, some evergreens, a lot of deciduous flowering plants. In other words, it is really diversity. It is not a line of evergreens, which is beautiful and is great when it's functional, or it needs to be very narrow. And maybe you choose a very narrow arborvitae, particularly if there's no deer to munch on it. But mine is diversity, and it's very effective, even in the wintertime with a lot of things that lose their leaves. But the beauty of the crepe myrtle and the bark is outstanding. Excuse me, in the wintertime. So crepe myrtle. Now you're going to say that particular one's too big for me. There's a size for everybody, right down to 3 or 4 footers. So think about crepe myrtle. And in the next one, we see our garden really well when it snows. And the beauty of that, yes, I do enjoy the snow. Obviously, if I can stay inside, not be out in it and the mess of it later, but it's truly beautiful, and it really points out the structure and the bones of a garden. Now, this is a large tree, but it points out the structure of the small ones also, and also of the evergreens, okay? Boxwood. I use a lot of boxwood, and now there are a lot of choices for you, those that are resistant to the blights and the problems that boxwood has had. I need I don't know what's going on here, but look at the beauty of that. Every 4-season thing needs evergreens. Don't know what's going on here, Dan. I think we may have to just go do a couple of pictures.
Okay.
Yeah, take your time if you need a minute, Peg.
That's my water.
More water.
More water.
Evergreens. Look at the tones and the colors in the evergreens themselves. Now, granted, the Japanese maple is not evergreen, but the blues and the golds and the bronzes. And choose the size that works for you in your garden so that you're not fighting it. There are for foundations or for areas where you don't want plants to overgrow that you can buy, that you will not have to worry about pruning all the time or cutting back too hard. And I would have to say that with the hydrangeas, you have to be particularly careful because you got to be careful of pruning some of them. And the next one. This is an area beneath a large Japanese maple. It has a lot going on. It has a lot of layering. There's the height of the Japanese maple, which is very good for small gardens. So this is within my large garden, but this is doable in a small garden, even a townhouse garden. It's got a lot going on. And most of those plants are, I'm not going to call them dwarf, but small, miniature maybe, dwarf hinoki cypress, some dwarf pines. There's a number of different types, dwarf boxwood. And then there are small perennials growing among it. So you're getting diversity here. Next one. Here you have a display garden. This is Isley Nursery, where we buy a lot of our unique plants. So go out and visit other gardens. Now, you may not be able to visit this one because it's in Washington State, but you can go to the Botanic Gardens. There are many gardens in the Washington, D.C. area that are lovely. and to take a look at some of those and say, what do I like? You know, the Ripley Garden in downtown Smithsonian is absolutely beautiful. Take a trip down there soon. But here again, you've got diversity. You've got those canopy, and sometimes it's a large tree that's the canopy, and sometimes it's an understory tree like dogwood, Japanese maple, red bud, silver bell. Then you've got varying sizes of smaller plants beneath it. So this is how you get diversity.
Peg, which nursery did you say that this was? Which nursery did you say that this was?
It was Isley.
Isley.
Isley. You'd have to go back. Go back to that slide. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Reverse. Can you read that? Iseli. But they're a nursery that only sells wholesale, okay? And we carry a lot of their plants and they're very unique. Okay, accomplishing the diversity. You have your evergreens, and hopefully they're evergreens that are going to suit your area, not to overgrow. And you really just need to pay attention when you're shopping in the nursery of sizes. And you can pretty much figure that most of them are actually over a long period of time going to get a little larger than it might state. Since if it says 5 foot, expect maybe 7, okay? Among those, there are perennials. And because this is a fairly sunny area, there are perennials that bloom over a period of time. So that you've got that change of seasons thing. Perennials don't bloom all summer for the most part. They have a period of bloom. And then you also add a few annuals to carry that through the entire season. Because if you deadhead the perennials, so deadhead the annuals also, you will prolong the bloom time, okay? This one is actually, I think it's the president's house at American University, which they pretty much turned into a botanical garden also, which is wonderful. A lot of the universities and a lot of cemeteries have done this, and it's a great thing to do. I was impressed with how they dealt with that foundation, because obviously you can see there's a pretty steep change of grade here. And they have also used plants that don't overgrow, with a couple of exceptions. I think perhaps the large cherry tree that you see on the side is a bit large for a lot of homes, you know. So you might choose a smaller growing tree like a dogwood or a red bud or a silver bell or one of those, okay? But here you've got the layering, and you've got different plants that won't overgrow, and you don't have one plant of everything. You've got enough mass there to carry it well. And I know an awful lot of people throw stones at variety. I don't do that. Yes, it's common. Yes, it can be overused, but it certainly serves a tremendous purpose at my household. I love variety. It's very easy. You don't have to edge those beds. You can run that mower right by it. It's great. Okay, let's look at just a few plants that are a wonderful addition. I have Mahonia belii. Mahonia belii. Now, it's a pretty sticky bush, okay? So you don't want it in a pathway that you're going to brush up against, okay? This particular one can get 5 to 6 feet tall. It is very green. It is a beautiful plant all year long. And now in February, February, depending upon the weather, usually it's February, you get all these incredible yellow blossoms, and they're fragrant. And after they bloom, it sets beautiful blue berries. And the birds love those berries. So you've got a lot of seasonal interest at a time of year when you really are enjoying anything that's colorful. Okay, now within my garden right now, the first bulbs that come into bloom, which are just fantastic, the little Galanthus Navalis. And I've got 2 or 3 different varieties in there. And so they bloom at different times. So I can have them coming into bloom in December, blooming through January, blooming through February, and going into March. So it's a lot to get from those. And then along with those, starting in February usually, Hellebores. I've truly never met a Hellebores I didn't like. And we've got a lot of new ones on the market right now, but I love my old ones too. I have so many of them, so that in many areas of my garden, in the back particularly, they're ground cover. Now I'm going out right now and trimming right way back the old foliage. Be careful that you do not cut the little new guys coming up, because that's where you get your beautiful flowers. These Hellebores are coming into bloom now. They'll bloom through the last of February through March and still be beautiful through April. Even though their intense colors may be gone by April, they're still beautiful. And then I have the bulbs, the Narcissus, that again bloom in stages, so that I have something from the Narcissus world in bloom in February, March, April, and through May. So this is again being able to get that diversity. When I told you my Hellebores have become ground covers, they have. There's very little weed competition here. That's a big plus. There's one beauty about particularly gardening with shade, which a lot of my garden is shade, part shade, dappled light throughout the day. And these Hellebores thrive. They're promiscuous. They seed around themselves, and I distribute those babies all over, or they distribute themselves. And they never come exactly like the parrot, so that's interesting. So you can see here how beautiful they can be in mass if you've got that kind of space. Otherwise, you situate them among other things. And when you've got bulbs coming along with them, that is particularly nice, okay? Let's go again, babe. Okay. Oh, Helleborus. Yeah, look at the variety there. Pretty incredible. And this was a couple of years ago. I think I have even better variety now. But I'm really looking forward to that. I actually took a walk through the garden yesterday, and a lot of them are already coming into bloom. Yes. Now, okay, Narcissus. I love all the bulbs, and I've planted almost all of them at one time within these many years that I've been gardening in this same area. So I have many, many daffodils, Narcissus. They're the same family, okay? I have tulips also. And here again, Clara last year absolutely loved going out and harvesting those Narcissus. Now, when you pick those to bring them in to enjoy in your home, and you certainly should, they are long lasting, put them first in a container of water by themselves. Because if you right away put them in with other flowers, they exude something that the other flowers don't like. So if you start them out by themselves in some water for a couple of hours and then transfer them to mix with different types of flowers, they are fine. Okay, but that's just a hint. Now, I go out and take pictures. When Bryn in our marketing department goes out, she takes art. Okay. So you look at your garden in an artful way. And there's so many, when you really take a walk through and look at what's happening, It's a delight. And this is the new fronds of fern with some of the narcissus blooming around it. And I just love it. It's beautiful. Now, how do you plant your daffodils? All right. These are plants that bulbs that you put in the fall, okay? You can buy a few. They're beginning to trickle in. I know there's some in the greenhouse, and we'll have a lot more in 2 weeks, perhaps, or a little earlier, perhaps, depending upon the weather. We will have them that you can buy and enjoy in your containers or plant in the ground if you wish, if you didn't plant things last fall. But when you plant, thinking in terms of 4 seasons, thinking in terms of the proper time to get the varieties you might be looking for, fall is the time to do it. With the large daffodils, the large narcissus, put them in the center of the border or the back of the border or near plants that's going to cover their foliage when it is maturing. Because when it turns yellow, it's not attractive, but it has to have that foliage in order to produce that bulb and that bloom for the following year. You do not want to braid it. You don't want to cut it off. So the best thing you can do is put it in the center of the border, because what you're looking at here right now will have perennials in the front and in the back that's going to come along a little later, and it's going to hide that foliage so that you're going to love the bulbs now and hate the foliage later. No, you don't want to do that. Okay, I grow a lot in containers, and the kids love it. They absolutely do. Gretchen here is totally enjoying the display that happened that year at Easter time. I grow a lot of bulbs in containers. One thing is you can move them from one area to the next. And some of the tulips are not necessarily perennial. So growing them in containers is a good way too. So think about that for next fall, or when we get in some of these bulbs that you don't have the selection, but they're still beautiful, okay? Really think about the trees. I have the tall canopy of oak, tulip poplar, sweet gum. A lot of canopy trees, but everybody doesn't have space for that. So think of your canopy and structure in your garden with mid-sized trees. This is a magnolia. It's obviously the deciduous magnolia. It's one of the girls, and I can't remember which one it is, okay? And it's pretty good size, actually. It got bigger than I thought it was going to. But I love this one. I'm very fond of dogwood, very fond of all of the beautiful understory type trees. And again, it can be your canopy in a small space. So look for the continuity of bloom from those plants in the spring that give you color, and most of them will also give you fall color and structure, even though they have no leaves. Okay. Another one that is really, and there's a lot of, among all of these things that I'm mentioning, there are a number of natives, although I'm not pointing that out right now. There are native viburnums. I love the viburnum. They need some sunshine, but they will grow with a lot of shade also. This particular one is called popcorn. I guess it looked like popcorn to somebody. Has long period of bloom and is again a part of the diversity of the border. You can enjoy a lot of color in a border if you use it for privacy. And if it's deciduous, as this is, loses its leaves. In the wintertime, you're normally not in the garden as much as you are all through the year. Here again, the tulips And I wanted to mention again, keep this in mind for next year. Kale. Kale is a wonderful addition to the Four Seasons garden because when you put it in the fall, it goes all through the winter and blooms out in the spring when the tulips come into bloom, and it's magnificent. Then you take it out and you put in your summer annuals, okay? So this is again part of that Four Seasons thing. Kale does much better than cabbage. We're gonna have to move along with these or I'm not gonna make it through. Okay, what else adds? There are a lot of perennials that can give you that Four Seasons. In the background, you can see azaleas. I have many, many azaleas, most of which are quite old. I depend a great deal on fern. I love the fern and I do them in masses wherever I can. And then there's the ground covers. This is Tiarella in this particular picture, which is a cross with coral bells. And oh my goodness, I'm missing it. Tiarella. Anyway, Hookerella. I'm sorry. Hookerella is Tiarella crossed with coral bells. All three are beautiful in the landscape with ferns. Okay. Hosta. I have to have Hosta shade. I don't grow them in full sun. There are some that do tolerate a lot of sun, but usually by the heat of August, they kind of scorch off a bit, and I don't like it. I like to use the different sizes. Here you see an upright one with a mid-sized flowing one, and then you graduate down to the little miniatures. So I love the diversity within that plant species, okay? And they grow so well. Here they're growing under the canopy of a large oak. And sassafras, I have a lot of native, true native sassafras, and they grow well there. And there are a lot of azaleas surrounding it. So this is a big spring thing. Come back to me just for a minute, Danny. And I apologize for the voice things, guys. Forgive me for that. Vibex is something that helps me with the deer. If I did not have this product, I would have no Hosta because that's top of their list, okay? As are a number of other things. It's not washed off by rain, or maybe after some really heavy rains, but in the springtime particularly, and now you're going to start seeing tulips come up, and they love tulips, both the foliage and the flower, and they love lilies particularly. So spray, and I just picked up Vibex, but there are 2 or 3 others that are good also, and everybody has their own preference. I've used this one for years. Follow the directions. I spray just as these things are coming up, and then I spray again 3 weeks later, and I'm sure to be able to spray everything just as the buds are beginning to set, because when you are so anxious to see these tulips and these lilies, particularly because I'm very fond of oriental lilies, they love them, and it's so disappointing. I had it happen to go out and see this lily, and then that day they managed to get all the buds. So this deer repellent Vibex helps me enjoy the garden, but you've got to be consistent with it. You don't have to spray every week, but you have to spray more in the spring when things are actively growing. Okay, Danny, let's get back, and we're gonna run through some of these fairly quickly. I'm not sure which number we're on right now. Okay, this I want to share with you because it is my back garden. There is a deck off the back of the house and a very casual little patio around the tree. And then there is an expanse, a small expanse of lawn, because we all need lawn for our family to get out and play their games and to run and to do the things. So whether you have a lawn or not depends upon how you want your garden to function. And for us, we need some lawn to function. But here is, to me, the epitome of layering. You have the tall canopy of trees. If your space is small and you don't want that or can't use that, then you treat those mid-size and smaller trees as your canopy. It's amazing how you feel when you're in your landscape. And sometimes with at least, even in a small backyard, if you've got one of these mid-sized trees, it gives you a covering, a feeling of safety because it's enclosing your space to a great degree. Okay, so you've got your canopy, whether it's big trees or mid-sized. And then you work with your shrubs, whether they be evergreen or deciduous. And they come in different sizes. I have a number of types back there. I've got yew, I've got the false yew, the plum yew, because the deer don't eat that one, okay? I've got a lot of cascading Japanese maple, boxwood, Lakothoe. I could name a number of things, and they're all different shapes and sizes. And then, of course, I have a lot of bulbs that are blooming. Not in this picture, but I do. And perennials, a lot of ground covers. So this is truly structuring the garden. And it can be done in a townhouse back garden. You just have to be careful about what you select to work. Here is actually a plant that I totally enjoy. And I do feel that it is underused, and that's the silver bell. I really do enjoy that. Halesia, Hallesia, is the botanical name, but it is called Carolina silver bell. And it certainly will get 15 feet easily, but it blooms beautifully and then sets little green berries. So this is a plant that's underused. And again, redbud, often underused. You get a lot of color, not just in the blooms, but in the leaf structure. Here's green, yellow, golden, and bronze. We're going to go through these fairly fast. Okay, what you're seeing here is in my front garden. And you're seeing in the background the room that had the area that has the privacy fence, so to speak, but that fence is a mixture of small trees like the crepe myrtle and rhododendron and things that fill in among that. And then in front of that, you have a lot of different sizes of the crepe myrtle. I have a wall there that's approximately a retaining wall. So I've got a few things above and a few things below and some perennials that bloom over a long period of time. So I've got a lot going on in that small space. Okay. Okay, I mentioned the love of the lilies. They really, they're wonderful. I absolutely love the lilies. And there's so many different ones and they're incredibly fragrant. So here you can see that the allium is just finished with its major bloom. I leave that up and the seed heads from that are very interesting. You get a wonderful contrast of that. And then you can see other perennials that are beginning in the background as the summer phlox. But there will have been something starting from the pansies in the border and the kale that will be finishing up through the winter. And then you go into the phlox and Russian sage and clematis. And there's so much going on in this particular area. And this is actually an area that borders the road and everybody enjoys it as it changes through the seasons, okay? Dahlias, very soon, our dahlias, bare root dahlias, and our bare root summer bulbs will be coming in. Cannas, dahlias, caladiums, I can't think, Danny, of all the different bulbs, but there are a lot. And there will be some wonderful choices. As soon as they come in, I like to start them inside and let them get sprouted. I don't want to do that too early. I usually do that in March so that they can begin to grow. And then as soon as the ground is warmed up and there's no frost, I can plant them out in the garden, either in containers or in the garden. Dahlias give you a long period of bloom. And they begin to bloom for me, and we get them in bloom here too. So you can do it either way. You can buy the tubers and start with those, or you can buy them growing and already in bloom. And that usually is late April and May, usually May. And they will bloom until frost if you deadhead. You have to be careful when you deadhead, because the ones that have finished blooming are very similar to the buds. So you want to learn which is which, okay? But this is a nice combination too. That's a dark leaf dahlia, and it's picking up the color of the dark leaf canna in the background. And in between is the green leaf of some ginger. And you can see there's also a color pickup with the Pennisetum rubrum grass, which is an annual. But there you have contrasts of color and contrasts of texture, which is, and long bloom, which is also good. Okay. This is going back a little bit to more springy. And I love, this is also good in park shade, alliums, and you can plant those in the fall. There will be some available growing this spring. There's Clematis, and you can put the Clematis in there. We have some on hand, and soon we'll have a lot more. I love, they need a fence, but they can also, if they're not really strong growers, they can also grow through shrubs or small trees. And what you're seeing over there is foxglove, and you can start those from seeds, or you can buy them in the perennials section. And here again, this is the same border that I showed you earlier with the dahlia and the canna and the pennisetum. This is extending down the border and a slightly later in the season, but you can see that there's a dahlia in bloom there. Again, a different variety of allium that I've left the seed head up, the Gloriosa daisy, and very obviously the summer phlox that you see in bloom. So there's a continuity of bloom here, which is tided over by the use of something like a dahlia or with annuals. And the Gloriosa daisy is a very, it's a Rudbeckia. It's in the Rudbeckia family, Rudbeckia hirta, and it's wonderful. Okay, Danny, how are we doing with, are we going to make it through? Okay, going more into fall, we always think of chrysanthemums, and certainly we can buy the, here, babe, yeah, here we go. It's winter time. Certainly we can buy many different colors of mums and tuck those into the garden. And I love those, but I'm particularly fond of what we refer to as our perennial mums, and they're found in the perennial section. These are our Sheffields, and that one is actually the apricot that you see in here. But I was pleased with this particular year that I grew these, because the golden thing that you see in the background is Hubretti, Amsonia Hubretti, and it blooms in the spring, a beautiful soft foliage all summer, and then in the fall for 2 or 3 weeks it's this vibrant golden color. So with that in the background and a change of texture as well as color, I have that Salmon Chrysanthemum. And I don't pinch it, although if I do pinch it just once in late May, early June, it'll bush out a little better, but I don't want that mounded look. I want it to flow, and these do. The white daisy that you see is Nippon daisy. Nippon daisy. So they bloom at the same time. And coming through that with the little bluish purple flower is a hardy geranium. And that one blooms off and on all summer long. Now you can all see the dahlias that are in bloom. But to me, this is just a great mix of texture and color and size of plants. So this is fall. And you can have a small section of that and still have spring bloomers around it, which is what I have in that particular space. Again, for fall, there's a lot of new salvia on the market. When we think of salvia, you don't want to just think of the red bedding salvia, because there's that and there's so much more. I grew a lot of these different rocking this and rocking that. Some of the names, I can't remember all of them, but, and Mystic Spires is another big, they get big. They can get 3 feet tall easily. So give them some room. I grew a number of them in containers. I grew some in the ground, and they bloomed until frost killed them. A deadhead every now and then. The hummingbirds love it. So think salvia this year. They are annuals for the most part. And here again, this is blooming with the wonderful contrast in the fall of that Ansonia hubric. Now it's a nice green in the summertime, which is also great foil for that salvia. It's hard to beat Canon. Most of the time they'll live over in this area. Mine have come back now 2 or 3 years. But if you want to be really sure you don't lose them, then you would have to dig them after the frost is in the fall. But mostly you'll find green and a lot of the bronze. I have in the background a big golden hosta, which is a nice foil for that dark foliage that makes it show off well. There's a great textural change there with the mid-sized grasses. Be sure you get one that's not invasive. And I love Pennisetum rubrum because that's a color pickup with Vacana. But it is an annual. And I really don't mind that because I kind of shift around what I plant during the year. And I don't mind because it only takes a few to be a real impact. And it is a tremendous impact throughout the entire season. I leave them up even after they're killed, so to speak, by the frost because their foliage is golden, and don't cut them back sometimes until winter cleanup, you know. Okay. Again, I do want to mention for you, tuck this in the back of your memory, that cabbage, when we sell them in the fall, don't winter as well as kale. Kale is a standby that goes through most of our winters, and then we'll send up flowers that are beautiful in the spring, and then they're done. Okay. But putting together some mums, some pansies, and some kale really is an impactful thing in the winter time. Okay. Again, another wonderful, wonderful plant that I cannot be without are camellias. And I'm particularly fond of the ones that bloom in the fall. I have quite a few of them. And this is actually a part of one of the scenes that you saw earlier where I was describing to you the canopy and the understory trees and the various things in my backyard. And so I use a lot of camellias, and depending upon the weather, they can be in bloom for 3 months, and I totally enjoy them. Plus, they're evergreen and their foliage is attractive. Okay. Enjoy bringing them inside. This is a fall arrangement. Don't be afraid to or worried about how well you've done that. Doesn't matter as long as you put them in water in a vase and enjoy them inside. Okay. Danny, let's move through these last. Maybe we'll have time for a couple of questions. Here I've used the grasses, the mums, and the canna leaves for a striking arrangement. Yes. Now, remember, even in small spaces, you can enjoy the diversity of plants. This actually is a picture that was taken from Fine Gardening magazine. I subscribe to a number of magazines, and Fine Gardening has always been top of my list. So you can get a lot of information, a lot of experiences from other people and designers. And so it's a source of wonderful information, and it's a visual source. This is somebody's designed backyard, townhouse back garden, but look what it has here. It has what we think of as an understory tree. It is deciduous, it loses its leaves. Let's say it's going to bloom in the spring. It's going to be green or bronze or whatever color. And then in the fall, it will probably take on some autumn color. And then you'll have the structure in the wintertime. So that's a 4 seasons plant. Then I see some evergreens, both taller ones and shorter mounding ones. And they can be green, they can be variegated, they can be blue, they can be bronze. So that's 4 seasons because they're going to go through all 4 of the seasons. And then I see some smaller shrubs that lose their leaves. But look, this is wintertime and they still have structure. And then you don't see a lot of it, but I know it's there. You can have clumps of bulbs tucked among this. This is an area where you want the stronger, bigger growing ones near the back. And you can have some of the small, what we used to call, well, they're miniature bulbs is the best thing to call them, okay? And then perennials and a few annuals. And you, within this space now, have 4 seasons of interest. So that's what we are talking about today. And I do have time for just a few questions, which I enjoy.
Great. Thank you so much, Peg. All right. So just a quick reminder to everybody, if we don't get to your questions today, you can always hit reply on the email that has your dial-in details. That goes directly to me, and I'll share that with Peg. Or if we have something that needs to go to the plant clinic, then I'll share it with our colleague, David Yost, who can also help answer some of those questions about disease issues or confusion about things that aren't growing correctly, that kind of thing.
I always leave the disease to David.
Yes.
When we were doing the TV show, I said, I'll take care of the beauty. He'll take care of the beast.
Yes. That is a good way to say what the two of you do. That's pretty great.
Well, he does beauty too.
Yes, he does as well.
I
Yes.
just don't deal with the beast, except the deer.
Yes. All right. The first question is, how can you achieve some diversity without some plants crowding out others? So how have you managed that in your own garden?
You have to look at your space. And if it is a townhouse, as I just showed you, you can see that they've been pretty careful about spacing out those plants. And when you're planting, and believe me, I made this mistake, and if you walk through my garden right now, you can see a number of those mistakes. Particularly if you're dealing with the dwarf or the miniature plants. And that happened to me, and I'm still living with some of that. It requires either a lot of pruning or taking out something every now and then. You have to look at the mature size of that plant. And then you also have to ask yourself, how long do I want to wait until this fills in? Or if I put these evergreens here and I give them ample space, it says they get 5 feet wide. I'm going to plant here, and from the center of this to the center of this, you're gonna need at least 5 feet from the centers. Space it a little further out and do perennials in between, so that while this is growing, you've got these things, or ground covers. Then you've got the continuity of it. Or you can make up in your mind, I don't want to wait forever for this. And you can plant them closer, knowing that at some point in the game, you're going to have to cut them back or take one out. That's about the best time. You've just got to analyze what kind of space do you have and what do you want to accomplish with it.
All right, thanks, Peg. All right, next question I'm going to ask before I forget. We had someone write in and ask if the Hellebores are in and when other plants start to get in to the store. And so I thought I'd check with you quickly. Do we have Hellebores yet?
The Hellebores are coming in.
They're
We have some very nice ones right now. We are expecting a load of Hellebores this week, and then we will have a flow of them continuously.
Okay, yeah, and other plants are heavily dependent, and Peg, you can add to this. It's seasonal based on when the weather changes, but the spring blooming plants will start coming in a little later.
Well, everything is weather dependent right now.
Yes.
We will be getting in those things that can take cold, which are pansies, and hopefully they'll probably start coming in next week. We've got some now, but we'll have a lot more. We will get a lot of those things that tolerate the cold. Okay, we'll get vegetables also that tolerate the cold, and then we will begin to bring in the annuals and the vegetables that don't tolerate the cold. So it's a continuous flow of plants starting next week.
That's great. All right. Yeah. And always feel free to call us or email us if you want to know what's in at what time.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question is a little bit back. So you showed a couple of tulips. Do you happen to know which types of tulips you have planted in your garden, or do you have any recommendations?
You know, I don't remember the exact varieties because I've planted so many. The more perennial types, of course, and I will be doing a presentation in the fall, I'm sure, but the species tulips, which are much smaller, are more likely to come back year after year. In fact, I have those seed in my garden and it's beautiful. But if you're going to the other types, I know that the Fosteriana and the Darwins are likely to hang in there for 2, maybe 3 years. So some are definitely a little hardier than others, but no, you just have to like the one you're standing in front of and buy it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. We have a question about one of the shrubs from early in the slides. It was that blooms in January and February. It had yellow blooms. Do you know what that would be? Good. You have your pictures. Yeah.
Well, I got the pictures, but you know what?
It might
I
be.
didn't number the pictures, and I need to do that. So I showed you the Helleborus. Oh, with the yellow blooms.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Mahonia Belii.
Yes.
This is a 5-footer, can be 6 feet easily. Mahonia Baeli, I think is Belii. Mahonia Belii. I love that plant, but it isn't one you want to plant in the path you're going to brush up against. Okay.
I love Mahonia too.
Plant it under your window if you don't want somebody climbing in the window.
All right, here's your next question. And some of these get pretty specific into what plants are. People love your garden, I can tell. What vine does Peg allow to grow up her large canopy tree? That one that's in the center of all your massive plantings?
That's Clematis.
That's
Clematis, as you wish.
Okay.
Clematis, Clematis. And there's many varieties. And I usually want one of everything, you know. So it can grow on a fence, or it can grow and mingle through a shrub. And it's fantastic. Just to be sure you don't buy the autumn, whatever one. There's 2 really strong growers that you don't want to grow through your bushes because it would overwhelm them. Okay.
Sounds good. All right,
Most all the others are great for that purpose.
here's a question about where to plant things. Talk about all the digging. I find it's hard to plant things under trees and next to perennial shrubs. Do you have a good strategy?
What to plant? Well, I did show you a number of things in this that can be planted in those areas. You saw hosta, you saw tiarella, you saw a number of things, but I do have a shade gardening, I've forgotten just when, Sally, coming up that will give you more of that, the ferns. You don't want to destroy the root system of your trees if you're just putting those in. So make your holes carefully. And if you see you're hitting a major root, move it over slightly, okay? I don't ever recommend tilling beneath trees, okay? I just don't think it's a good idea because a lot of those roots grow closer to the surface than you think. And if I want to plant Pachysandra or some of the other epimediums, some of the other wonderful ground covers, or a mixture of those, I may add a couple of inches of compost. And we sell compost as leaf grow. It's really, we're gonna get it in bulk or in the bag and put down a couple of inches and then carefully plant into and through that so that you're not messing with the root system of your big trees or even mid-sized trees. I hope I answered that question.
I think that's good information. All right, how long have you been designing and planting your garden? That's a good question.
Well, let me see.
Tours.
Most people would never stay in one place as long as my family has, or I have. And actually, we bought our property in Tyson's Corner when it was a quarter, and I have been gardening ever since. My mother was a gardener. I grew up on a farm and loved what she did. She particularly loved camellias and hybridized those. And she was a great gardener, and I inherited that. Yes, I love it.
Your garden is definitely aspirational for a lot of us. We look at it and want to have.
Well, it's emotionally bolstering too. And my children love their gardens. I'm not going to say they garden to the degree that I do, but they certainly do garden. And my grandchildren, and now the little granddaughters, 2 little granddaughters. So I believe in teaching the young. I say that in every program. I believe in that.
Yes. All right, looks like we've got time for maybe one more question. So here's one about cutting things back. So they're asking specifically about lavender and rosemary that survived the winter. Should they cut that back in early spring?
I do not cut that back now.
Okay.
I hopefully would like my lavender to bloom and your spike is here. Then after it really finishes blooming and is no longer that pretty purplish thing, then you cut it back within the foliage. Don't ever cut back all the way into that brown older wood because it will not sprout out from that normally. So I trim it back then. And actually, if these flowers are dried on the lavender, it's amazing how fragrant they stay. So you can strip them off and put them on a little container and enjoy the fragrance even. But I trim that back after the first flush of bloom. And then it will rebloom in the fall and be beautiful again. And sometimes you get some spontaneous blooms in between. So lavender is a favorite. I would not trim back except for use when you're cooking, which I do go out and pick it. I would trim it back when the weather warms up a little bit and it's going to start its new growth. Okay, you can trim it back somewhat, use those trimmings in your cooking, and then when the new growth comes out, you can even pinch that back.
All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, I know we're about out of time. So just a quick reminder to everybody, if you didn't get your question answered and want to follow up, just hit reply on that confirmation email, send me a note, and I'll help you get your question answered. Peg, recording will go out tomorrow along with a copy of Peg's handout. Again, for anybody who was having some issues accessing it today, or if you just want a second copy, then that'll arrive sometime tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. And Peg, is there anything you'd like to wrap up with?
As far as the handout is concerned, it certainly isn't perfect, but it does name a few of these plants. And I think it would be beneficial, particularly if you have your video and you can put this in front of you and go down using this along with the video. Hopefully it will give you even more information or remind you of what I did present. Okay. Yes, I like the handout because it gives the benefit of reminding you of what I said.
It's very handy to have a list like that. Thank you so much, everybody. Peg, thank you for doing this with us today. And everybody feel free to check out our website for more upcoming events. Peg has some more classes coming up, and we'll be adding, some of them are already on, and we're going to be adding a couple more that we discussed, I think, last week. So everybody have a great day. I'll talk to you all later.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.